I need all of you to be silent and to not say a word, because we need to have a moment of silence for the bridge between Vaush and Riley Grace Rashong, okay? We just sat through like 2 hours of the Vaush, or of the Doe versus RGR debate. Now we have like an hour and a half to sit through of the Vaush versus RGR debate. So that's going to be exciting, huh? Let's get it!
Hey.
Good evening.
I'm going to juice up first.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. So, the debate was between you and Doe. I don't want to rehash its entirety here, but you had thoughts to share, and Doe consented to your presence without it, so I'm happy to hear you out for a time. What do you have on your mind?
Yeah, no problem, and thank you for having me on. I guess I want to address some of the things because I don't feel... I guess I like...
Xander Hall, this is taking place after RGR asked constantly to come on, after Vaush already said she could during Vaush watching the entire debate. So basically this whole time, RGR has been spamming Vaush, let me on, 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 Vaush saying, okay, I will after this debate, okay, I will after this debate. And now finally she's on. So this is following the Doe debate, by the way. This is right after. RGR is coming fresh off of that embarrassing debate with Doe.
Like the main thing right now for me is that I feel like people are not listening to what I'm saying or engaging with what I'm saying. And I feel really hurt by the fact that I feel like people are not listening to me, despite the fact I am genuinely, regardless of whether or not you believe me, trying to the best of my ability to engage with you or the perspectives of people who disagree with me. So I want to go through like a couple points to begin with, and just like I know that you said I was hardcore logical tunneling. I know that that's something that you...
Well, I think you have lawyer brain, at least selectively,
well,
with certain degrees of specificity, but it didn't last very long in the conversation, I don't think.
Well, the reason I'm very particular with my wording, right? I try to be very particular. I try to think through my positions, and I try to think through the outcomes of
my camera.
Positions.
Oh, I'm
and
covering
so the
Vaush,
reason
right?
why I stick to very particular wording is because it is important for the purposes of the fundamental issue in this conversation.
I'm probably going to end up playing Diablo 2 Remake or whatever it's called, Reforged. I forget what they called it. Like this Diablo 2 Remake, I'm probably going to play it off stream because Diablo 2 was the first game I ever played in my whole life.
And so in this conversation, the thing that we started with was the question of, did I ever call Doe a pedophile? That was the bottom line question of the debate. All right?
Yes, though I don't think it is anymore. Because I think most people would argue that at this point you've now done worse things than call it a pedophile. It sort of very directly.
Well,
and that's just sort of like the initiating concern. Now.
Can we talk through some of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I want to begin with kind of the end of it and then build back, if that's fine, with the personal comments. So when Doe said that, and I was told that this was a possibility,
because I need to be, Lonnie.
I was
just a little
reasonably suspicious that Doe would bring up their past experience as a trauma victim.
Welcome to capitalism,
right?
Dude.
Thank you.
And
that is egregious.
That is like everything that happened to them in respect to that is horrible and awful, and I do not disagree with that.
There you go, Cherry.
Right? The problem is whether or not it was relevant to the conversation that we were having. And I think that it caught me by surprise. So I think to an extent, like the answer I gave makes sense, but I reflected on it more with my chat. And the reason why it was not relevant, and this is why I would say it's more so poisoning the well, that it didn't actually have to.
Yeah, want to point out, by the way, continuously, repetitively, and insistently, Riley continues not to use Doe's preferred pronouns. Like, this isn't like a mistake or anything, like RGR just forgetting that Doe's pronouns are its or whatever. This is Riley Grace, out of disrespect for Doe, very much insisting on not using the preferred pronouns.
To do with the conversation is because the thing that Doe was describing, like the person in that situation was not doing an action, right? They were standing and they were contemplating, but for me, I do not punish. I would not just say that a sex act is just thinking. And we can get into this if we want to, because this is something that and this is a big reason why I arrive at my position, right? But like when we try to conceive of what exactly a sex act is, I think that the best definition that we can arrive at is when someone is doing something with the specific intention of primarily appealing to a sexual desire or taste. I think that is the best definition.
Hey guys, you want to hear? I got a fun idea for a game that we could do during this segment, okay? It would be a really fun game, and I think you guys would really enjoy it. Do you guys want to hear my idea for this game that we could play during this reaction to the debate? What if, now hear me out guys, what if every time Vaush got a donation, you guys matched it? Wouldn't that be a fun game, guys? What if every time Vaush got a donation, you guys donated the same amount to match it? That sounds like it would be a really fun game.
And that's what a lot of the debate was sort of about defending, right?
Right. And well, a couple of things.
And then you can talk. But so here, the person who they were describing was not. I would say they weren't doing an action, right? But the point being that like. So here, the main issue is that I just want to know what an alternative definition is to sexual act. That's not what I'm proposing. That doesn't otherwise lead to really bad outcomes.
I think Doe's whole point is that your insistence on reducing all sexual actions down to a single all-encompassing term is unhelpful. That's the reason why it brought that up to begin with. Your definition of sex act includes dressing for the club if you're looking to arouse people with your fat tits, and doesn't include leering at a child who you may or may not purchase for sexual acts. That seems to me like an that seems to me wait
up 1 second.
Okay.
That seems to me like a very unhelpful definition of sex acts. So maybe it would be better to consider multiple terms that we could fold different types of behavior into. Maybe the term sex act isn't really what we're looking for. Maybe we're talking about harm implicitly or explicitly, and sex act is something which sometimes but not always overlaps with that. Like, for example, the people dressing. You did say in that debate with Doe that you felt like dressing with the intent of arousing people in public was a violation of others' consent, around children's consent.
That's not...
Is that not true?
No, I wouldn't make that argument. So, or rather,
as being a MILF a sex
if I
act?
did, that's
by
not
Riley's
what
standards,
I
yes.
intended to convey. Again, the thing I focus on is whether or not you're doing something primarily, emphasis on primarily, in order to appeal to a sexual desire or taste.
People do that with their clothing, don't they? There are absolutely people who like when you're going out to the club, there are people who dress. I mean, there are girls out there dressing in ways that have their only consideration is looking sexy and fitting within the boundaries of the law. And that's pretty much it. I would say that's primarily an effort to elicit sexual desire.
I disagree, though. I would say that people who do that dress for any number of other reasons aside from trying to elicit sexual desire. Like when I go
possibly
out to,
including sexual desire,
when I dress
right?
up, I'm not dressing up because I'm trying to like appeal to someone's sexual desire. I usually pick what I wear because it makes me personally happy.
But we're not talking. We're talking about some people. There are people for whom it is certainly the primary concern. I don't go out dressing primarily. I wear shorts and t-shirts, but I know there are people who will go on out there trying to look as sexually enticing as they can.
But I would contest that then, because I would think that the only example where this realistically comes up, and maybe I needed to press this more in the debate, I think that the only time where this where you're only dressing primarily for sexual desires or tastes is like when you're wearing like a gimp suit and you're using that to like get off.
I honestly think you're
Really?
only saying that because the alternative would be acknowledging how unworkable your definition is. There are
I don't
absolutely
think that's
people who
the
dress
case.
in ways which complies with public decency guidelines, but is also primarily about sexual arousal. Like, now, of course, you now, and faced with that, you have two possible responses, which is either you call everyone who's ever dressed for the club a pedophile, or unintentionally enabling pedophilia, or you try and find a way in which the act of dressing to arouse other people while just barely skirting decency laws is somehow not a primarily sexual act. The fact that your
That's why we're
first
focusing on
resort
intent.
was to describe your intentions suggests to me that this is, well, I mean, you have to say something here.
Vaush is a very good debater. That's all I have to say here. He's a very good debater. I like the way he debates a lot.
Or you would have to change your definition, wouldn't you?
I mean, the difference is that what you're describing right now are not instances when people are wearing things primarily for sexual desires or interests. It sounds like that may be an element of it, but I would not say that's the primary purpose in those situations.
How do you quantify that exactly?
Usually it's going to, well, I mean, so this gets back to like the distinction between like ontology, epistemology, ethics. So like, you know, how do we...
I beat Vaush in a debate once on Chris Chan. I've debated Vaush one time, and it was on Chris Chan, and I beat him. And that'll be the only time I debate Vaush.
We actually tell when people are engaging in a sexual act? Well, usually we're going to go off of the totality of
I'm going to hold that
available
one W
evidence.
forever.
What if they just
and in
tell
this
you
case-
the reason they're doing it is to sexually arouse people? I mean, I've had convos. Like, have you ever been to like a slutty Halloween costume party? I mean, you can ask them. They're doing it to sexually arouse people. You can just directly ask them. They will tell you. There's no need to fuss about with it. They will just say it very directly.
We need... All right, hold on. Maybe I'm not asking the right questions. So let me ask you then, all right? Because maybe this can help you understand at least my perspective better. Because I'm just trying to... What I want is for people to just understand this perspective. So what would you define as a sexual act?
I honestly think it's stupid to even try. I guess, I mean, I genuinely think that human sexuality is complicated enough that a term to encompass the entirety of acts that would fit within its purview would be subjective and almost impossible to, like I could come up with one and another person could come up with a very different one, and I don't know if I could say theirs is any worse than mine, or better. But if I had to come up with like a quick definition, like, I don't know, an act which pertains in some way to one or another's sexual desire or arousal, like an act which is related in some way to your or another's sexual desires.
Okay, all right, so we don't sound very different.
Right, but I believe kissing near children is okay.
Right, but I wouldn't say that kissing is always like primarily done for sexual reasons.
No, you just changed the definition. I said any act which relates to sexual desire. And I promise you that it's not, I am not alone in believing that making out with somebody, even a quick peck sometimes, you know, depending on how pent up you are, that's life, absolutely pertains to sexual desire. And I think you can do that in front of kids. I mean, if you couldn't kiss in front of kids, like, I mean, it's all over for all of us, I think.
Sure, but in this instance, so like this gets into like, all right, how do we arrive at like better definitions, right? Because like to an extent, you know, I can agree that like, yeah, we're focusing on like, we can have a wide range of different possible things. And usually it's going to relate to sexual desires or interests. Like I'm with you on that. But then you've introduced an issue where it's like, okay, sometimes we need to be able to make differentiations, because I would agree with you that like, yeah, like if you give someone a peck in public, then that's not something that we should call like pedophilia, or that's not something we should call a public sex act.
But you
which is why I focus on primary. Well, I mean, we can like dialogue back and forth and figure out a better definition, right? And the problem that I have is that people keep looking at me like, oh, Riley, you present a really like outlandish, crazy definition, but I have yet for someone to present me with a better one. And I feel like this is important for us to talk about and for us to have a clear and concise rule on. because we want to be able.
Okay, Riley is a lawyer. She should, or is studying to be a lawyer. She should know this. Okay, so in law, here's an example of an actual, like a real life legal example of why we don't set a super hard legal boundary on certain things, because it can be redundant to do so. Believe it or not, but legally, there isn't really a super solid definition of child porn by law. Did you guys know that? And it's a good and it's good that that's the case too, because the actual like policy is generally you know it when you see it, right? I think they explain this really well in Law & Order SVU. I think there's a scene where one character explains the you know it when you see it thing, where it's like, so got a picture of my daughter in my wallet. It's her at the beach, and she's wearing a swimsuit, right? Now, for me, this is just a picture of my daughter I took at the beach. For some creeper who's got that on their computer, it's a felony, right? And that's how he explains it. That's how we currently categorize child porn in America, because you need to have that amount of nuance to determine that. And I think the same thing should be done when it comes to sex act. It should be a case-by-case basis thing. If you've just got some dude walking around barefoot in public because he's at the beach or whatever, that shouldn't be considered illegal. But maybe if you've got a guy who's super into a foot fetish and he walks around, with no shoes on at like a children's birthday party, and he gets off on the fact, and you can prove that he gets off on the fact that like kids are seeing him shoeless, obviously then it would be illegal and there'd be a problem. But we need to consider this on a case-by-case basis. Setting a hard definition of sex act is only going to lead to problems in the future. It's either going to go too far or go too short. If you set a solid, immovable definition of a sex act, rarely is it ever going to happen to be exactly where it needs to be, and to cover as much as it needs to cover, and to encompass as much as it needs to encompass, because it just sounds like it's going to lead to problems to me.
Able to have moral rules about when someone is violating someone else's consent in respect to sexual acts.
But a single term won't be able to encompass that, because kissing is a sexual act. I mean, often at least, absolutely. But we can do that in front of kids. That's fine. I think it's kind of weird if you're like looking for groups of kids to make out in front of. Like Doe said, it seems there that the intent to involve children is quite a bit worse than children being incidentally around, because everyone's kissed near kids. I mean, at least I think most of us have. But you were insistent on avoiding specificity with definitions with Doe.
Actually, here's a fun question, all right? So I think I've told the story of how I lost my virginity on stream before, but I'll give a quick rundown on it, and then I'll follow it with a question having to do with this whole is it or is it not immoral thing here. So I lost my virginity to a girl who was running a daycare at a church. She was like an employee at the church's daycare, and she was the girl I lost my virginity to. I had sex with her in her car in the parking lot of said church. So basically, my ears do not consent. So basically, my uncle would drop me off at this church in the parking lot. I would go up front and I'd wait for her to get off work. So she would walk out of the church and we'd go to her car and we'd get into the car and we'd like fuck in the car, right? And that's how we do it. Now here's the question. During that time, it was like, how old were you both? I was 18, she was 21. So during that time, I'd like just turned 18. During that time, there were families coming out of the church, walking across this the parking lot and whatnot. And while we were very, very careful, it's very possible children could have seen us having sex in this car. Now, we couldn't just start the car and go because her grandparents are really weird and would cut off the money they gave her if she like lied to them and didn't do exactly as they said. So they want her to be from work to straight home. So if she started her car, they'd get a notification on her phone. They'd know she'd started her car. And if she didn't come straight home, they would know. So she couldn't even start her car. So she had to park it in an area in the parking lot where, I know, very fucked up dynamic, don't get me wrong. But she had to park in a very specific part of the parking lot where it was close enough to the entrance that the security guards wouldn't be checking the cars or like really checking around too much, but far enough that like not too many people would be going by. So it was very possible that some family coming out of this church could have seen us. So Is this an immoral action? Obviously not. We weren't getting I wasn't getting off by the fact there were kids around. I don't know about her. Security guards at a church. Silent. Hold on. Let me just show you guys. Oh, sorry. Let me just show you guys the size of this church. Like, I've showed it on screen before, but if I go to, like, this was a super church in Tampa, Florida, okay? Like, this thing is fucking huge.
Any excuse to talk about having sex in a car at a church. Here you go.
Thank you, baby. You're the best. Love you more. All right. This, I believe, is it. Is it? Yeah, Idlewild Baptist Church. I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. This is a fucking massive church. This is a car. This is the church. These are the cars in proportion, okay? Just a massive church with a massive parking lot. She would park around here because this is close enough to the end. Like, you'd think parking here would be the place to do it, but the security guards roam a lot here and here. So she would park right here because the security guards didn't check as much here. So yeah, this is where I lost my virginity and, proceeded to have sex with the same girl a few more times. Was this an immoral action? I would argue no. So yeah. I certainly wasn't getting off on the fact there were kids possibly walking around. There were cases where we had to cover ourselves up with like a blanket because a family walked straight past the car and could have just turned their heads and looked through the window and seen us there naked having sex. So I like grabbed a blanket and covered us up. It was like that scene Lord of the Rings where Sam covers Frodo and him in like the cloak that makes them look like a rock when the Easterlings come by. It was like that. That's what it was. That's what we were doing basically. So yeah, my five guys just arrived. So oh yeah, she was like a super slutty, super Christian church girl too. Slut puppy. Anyway, my food just arrived. So I'm gonna eat that. And we're going to enjoy it while we watch this. So I'm going to get rid of my camera while I eat because you guys don't need to see that.
Or you only wanted one. I mean, you wanted
But I'll pause my eating. I'll pause my eating and talk like as I go, but I eat really quickly, so I'm not pulling a Nazan here, okay? I'm not pulling a Nazan. Plus me and Vaush are friends, so it's okay.
Well, I've defined sex act for you, and I have just described to you a sex act which we conduct freely in public. So your insistence that sex acts done in public violate the consent of others by the category you've agreed to, with my definition, is false.
Yeah, then, all right, so then we have to get into the issue of evaluating the strength and the utility, because I know that you understand that like words, social constructs, we generally are going to advocate for meanings of words which give us greater or lower utility, right? Are you on board with me with that?
Yeah, I like utility. But you're a Kantian, aren't you? Of what relevance is that to you?
Well, I mean, like with language, we can be able to look at like the meanings of words and make those kinds of evaluations.
Oh.
So here, we can look at two different definitions of what sex acts are, and we can be able to go through applications of those and be able to derive whether or not they lead to outcomes which we feel are morally sound or justifiable. And so that's the whole point of going through these scenarios. So like if you give me a rule for what is a sex act, and then you turn around and you say,
I don't know why she's doing this. It can just be judged on a case-by-case basis so easily. Setting this hard line just makes things more difficult.
Or not, I don't want to say, sorry, that's loaded language. But then you demonstrate the limitations of that rule, you demonstrate the limitations of that definition, then I would say, okay, so now we can look at a different rule, or we can adjust that so we can be able to account for the issues with that kind of rule.
By the way, by some people's standards, and by their beliefs, being trans is a sex act. They believe that being transgender is a sex thing. So by Riley's definition, for those people, just being transgender around them is a sex act. Being trans and around children would be pedophilia. Oh, wait! That is what they believe. Oh, it turns out Riley's definition of being sex, of a sexual interaction or whatever, is almost lockstep with that of like Michael Knowles or Ben Shapiro.
Right?
Right, I would agree. And I think that whatever exemptions you would make would well include what Doe was talking about in the conversation. Going barefoot in a park where kids might be, when you have a foot fetishist partner. I cannot imagine that as a violation of anyone's consent, because to everyone around you, they're just seeing a person whose feet are out. But I mean, like, to be clear, I've agreed with Doe's perspective on this. So, I mean, now apparently, it and I are both unintentionally promoting pedophilia. So, I think that's ludicrous. And I'll be more specific. I think it's so ostentatious that it borders on bad faith, and it's an attempt at you pedojacketing as a way of legitimizing a emotional discomfort you have with sexuality. That's the feeling I have. Like, it's so outlandish that the best explanation I can think of is that you're just generally uncomfortable with sexuality, and you're looking for the harshest condemnation you can find for people to avoid really confronting your perspective. And this is it. And you found it. And it ended with you essentially invalidating the child sexual exploitation of a CSA survivor.
All right. So I'm almost certain Riley is going to respond very offended at Vaush psychoanalyzing her. But he is spot on. Vaush is 100% spot on. That sounds 100% right to me. And I'm judging by the fact, based on how angry Riley gets at that, should act as sort of a gauge on how correct Vaush's inference was there.
Clearly, this is not an effective road for us to be walking. There has to be a better attitude to be taking towards this.
So I would say I disagree with, I think, all of that. But we can go through each step individually and walk you through why I think each individual part is wrong. I mean, I think that like the speculating to my mindset is blatantly wrong and unfounded. Like, I don't think that you know anything about me or my motivations or why I say the things that I do.
No, of course, it's an inference. I mean, that's what we have to make, don't we? I mean, we have to infer people's behavior sometimes. And when it comes to arguments like this, I cannot imagine a person as intelligent as you
Mating French fries. 1 second, I'm almost done.
As a component of some broader opposition to child sexual abuse, because that's not what it is. I mean, exempting some head injury. I mean, there has to be some other underlying motivation. So I reach, and I have to infer. You know.
Do you think? Well, hold on. Like, do you think that it could not just be the case that I really care about protecting consent?
I think this is an extraordinarily bad way of doing it, if that's the case. But if you do, I mean, I guess sometimes the thought is not what counts, you know?
Okay, so then let's go back, because you said that just the fact that, so let's go back to, you said a lot of things earlier. I want to go through them one by one. So you said that
being filled up by 5 guys, chat.
You agree with Doe that going out with your foot fetishist partner in public without shoes around children would make you a pedophile. Do you think that's what my position is?
How about you tell me what your position is on people who would go barefoot in public around their foot fetishist partner?
So with the way that you described it to me, I don't have an issue with the way that you described my position. I don't think this is the reason why I was saying in chat that you weren't describing my position, because the issue that I had with what Doe said specifically was not the fact that there was someone with a foot fetishist, or there was like someone with a foot fetish going out in public with like a partner who was not wearing shoes. That was not the issue in and of itself. The point was that the partner of the person with the foot fetish knew about the foot fetish, and that was the primary
Welcome
reason
to capitalism, my dude.
that they went shoeless in public in order to get them off. And you know that Doe agreed to that scenario, right? Like, the point isn't the existence of the foot fetish. The point is the intentionally primarily doing something to get your partner off in public around other people.
Yeah, I would assume if they're partners, they know about that. To me, this is a distinction without difference. Yes, I think that's the exact same thing.
No, I don't think that's... No, because in one situation, you are doing something primarily in order to get your partner off, and then the other you're not.
Sure.
I don't
yeah.
care.
Yes, you go barefoot because your partner likes feet. Yes.
All right, but hold on. There's a lot more there that you're skipping over, right? Like, this isn't just your partner likes feet. It's your partner is sexually attracted to bare feet.
I'm sorry. I'm not. The language I'm using isn't flippant because I'm trying to weasel out of specificity. I accept these terms. Yes, they are sexually attracted to the feet. They're awkwardly shuffling to hide their boner underneath their belt loop or whatever. Yes, sure. Fine.
Okay. And you know from watching the conversation that Doe agreed that within what they proposed, like the tweet that we were talking about, the tweet where they said that there's also like the calling them a pedophile, and I also dispute that. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. But in the tweet that we were talking about, they also agreed that like you were able to bring the other, like in the scenario that they were describing, that like it's also reasonably inferred that the person was able to get their partner to come to orgasm.
I don't know. The getting off means a lot of stuff. So they just like came from seeing their feet in public?
I'm pretty sure. I am about
I don't think that was part of the...
confident that Doe agreed to the premise that, yeah, they got...
Yo, chat, when the day of the rope comes for all the foot fetishists, I'm gonna be so sad when I have to kill Quentin Tarantino.
Their partner to orgasm in front of other people.
If Doe's still in chat, Doe, was that part of the initial premise? I don't believe that was the case. I think when people say getting off, they usually mean like, oh, you're getting off to something, like you find it at
515
at least that's what I've heard.
Based.
All right, well, I'm about 99.9% sure that I asked that very explicit question and that Doe agreed.
I think Doe said that in your conversation that wouldn't be a thing which necessarily violates the consent of the people around, but I don't think it was part of the initial tweet conversation, at least not to my memory.
No, but that was the issue, right? Is that was the natural implication of the initial tweet thread.
So let's really break it down then and isolate these variables, okay? I'll use a couple that I used while watching the video. Do you think that a person who orgasms from the vibrations of a bus... I bring this up because I had a friend who could do this, who does so from the vibrations of a bus, like coming while on a bus, like riding it, like that's a violation of the consent of the people on that bus?
It depends on whether or not they rode the bus with the primary intention of using it to get off. If they didn't, then I would say not. That's why I focus on primary.
But this is the same point that Doe made. The point that it's not wrong went with Riley, that Riley's hypothetical wasn't wrong because the primary intention of the person wasn't to predatorily seek out children to be humiliated in front of. Like, that's exactly what Doe said! RGR, you frustrate me. Oh, that's so frustrating.
Intention.
So what if they know that they can do this on buses because they've always been able to?
I'm going to speed it up and make Stupid Live forever.
I would say that it depends on whether or not they're primarily trying to appeal to a sexual desire.
So
they may be aware of it, but if they're not trying to appeal to a sexual desire, then no.
What if the couple wanted to go on a walk because they needed to pick up groceries, and the whole foot fetish barefoot thing was just sort of a flare along the way? The primary intent of their travel was to go pick up groceries, but they thought, oh, sure, you know, feet off or shoes off, why not? And then the other person comes in their pants. They're remarkably sensitive, I guess.
I would say, I think on the basis of those questions, I would also say that's not a sexual act. Because again, we're looking at primary intention, right? There, it sounds like, from what you described, that there's not like primary intention. If anything, it's like it's more of an accident.
The distinction between these things to me seems arbitrary and impossible to define. What is or is not a person's primary intent? I mean, like you were doing it earlier with how people dress. I don't know how you could ever maybe they could have driven to go get the groceries. Like how much of a percent of them not wearing shoes is part of the... I don't know if there's a way to really distinguish primary intent relative to the dozens of other things that might motivate us to do something the way we do. I mean, my primary intent when I go downstairs, like, am I getting chicken nuggets am I getting them from the oven? Am I saying hello to my cats? Am I enjoying the cooler temperatures down there? Like it all plays into it.
So here I would say that this is a distinction between ontology and epistemology. This is a difference between like, how do we, like, what is a sex act versus how do we know if someone is committing a sex act? And so when we're getting into the question of how do we know if someone is committing a sex act, right? how do we evaluate what someone's primary intention is? We're going to go off of, because it's inductively
That's
reasoned,
true.
right?
That's
the
true,
totality
Sassafras.
of available evidence. So, you know, if someone wears like a low-cutting top to a party or whatever, like the situation that you described earlier, we can reasonably infer that there's multiple reasons why those clothes are made in such the way that they are. So we would be able to say, like, all right, unless more evidence presents itself to the contrary.
By the way, we're going to play Minecraft while we watch this, okay?
We probably, as a society, are going to assume that you're not wearing that primarily for a sexual purpose. But in the contrary, for example, and this was during the King of Pride discourse, with wearing a gimp suit, something that is primarily designed for sexual purposes, then we are able to make a pretty easy distinction and say, okay, this is something where we can pretty easily say that, like, if you're using it and its primary use is for sexual purpose, then we can infer that you're primarily doing this for a sexual purpose.
But how could you do that with a person with a foot fetish? How do you know whether the primary intent of their walking was to satiate the fetish, or if they were just getting groceries and decided to spice it up along the way? There'd be no way without reading their minds. It's a meaningless distinction in practice. Likewise with taking the bus, if you nut from it, you know, like you could ask them, like, hey, did you get on this bus so you could nut? And they're like, no, I just really like 3rd Street. I mean, you could never have that conversation with them, I don't think. There's no way of knowing. And what's more, like...
Well, can I respond to that before you go on?
Well, is the nutting the thing? Like, if we... Or no, what about King of Pride? There are people who wear leather and gimp suits, not because it sexually satiates them, but because they feel like it's part of the culture of the LGBT community, and they wear it to show solidarity. Now,
right,
it's not my fashion choice, but that's definitely a thing that happens. I mean, it seems like if our definition of sex act is involving calculus and inference and all of this, and we're doing all of it to, like, mathematically determine what's appropriate in public, like, aren't there other ways we could talk about what's appropriate in public? Is wearing feet bare in public acceptable? Yes. Is kissing in public acceptable? Yes. Is wearing tube tops in public acceptable? Yes. Anything past that, any distinction or differentiation past that, seems like an effort in punishing sin. Like you're looking for people who are doing it the wrong way, almost. Like there's some invisible line.
All right, so the reason why we're looking at it through the lens of intent is because we want to be able to say sometimes when someone does something which no one else knows about, that we can still be able to morally condemn them, despite the fact that no one knows about it, right? Like the example that we went through several examples during the conversation, but like the primary one I use to describe this is like the perfect date raper, right? We can imagine someone who goes and date rapes someone in such a way where the person never ends up finding out.
The perfect date raper?
Right. And in that kind of a situation, there's no measurable physical...
Riley, stop! Stop doing this to yourself, Riley. The perfect date raper who does it all and the person never finds out. Riley, stop doing this to yourself. What are you doing?
Physical or mental harm if the other person never finds out. We want some way
to be able to say why that's morally condemnable, even if
a beautiful biome.
You never, like the person who is like harmed in this case never finds out.
Yeah,
that's the reason why.
You could invoke bodily autonomy. Yeah, even if they never find out, it's a violation of their bodily autonomy. Would you equate that to jerking off to somebody in your head? Because both of them are an invocation of them in your mind, at least?
I would not say they are the same, because I would agree that with the latter, there is also a bodily autonomy violation. I think with both situations, you run into a circumstance where you're violating the consent of the other person. And I will...
While jerking off while thinking about somebody?
So that's the extreme implication. I'll use
you directly said you believed that in your conversation. You said while talking with Doe that jerking off while thinking about something was using them. You were very insistent on that terminology.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, sure, I can justify that, but people seem to get hung up on it. But sure, I'll explain that. So basically, like, this goes back to the issue of finding words or rules which are able to lead to overall the most outcomes that we feel justified or fine with, right? Because I think that what I'm talking about, the baseline rule, overall leads to like the most common. Like I think that like in just about every other scenario, people will look at the implications of what I'm talking about, and for the large part agree with me.
That's
like for example with
not how I feel. I'll admit.
All right, well then we can talk about more examples. But like, for example, when we talk about something like with the age of consent, we have a rule that is useful in society. Sometimes we look at the implications of that rule and we end up squinting a little bit and thinking like intuitively, well, I mean, like if they're 17 months and like 11 or 17 years and 11 months, like is it like really that bad? But here it's like we can recognize that overall the word gives us, or like the rule gives us a lot of utility and a lot of help, even if sometimes it ends up leading us to morally admonish certain behavior that doesn't end up making as much sense. But it makes sense because otherwise the rule kind of falls apart and doesn't have any utility.
I don't disagree with that, but I don't see what that has to do with thinking of people while jerking off to them.
So here, this would be like the equivalent, because I would stand by it. But as far as like the intuitive reaction that people are having, because I understand people are looking at me like, what the fuck, Riley? But the reason why is because it's similar to people feeling like, oh, well, they were both like 17 and 11 months, right? Like it's the same intuitive, like, you know,
I don't think those are even remotely comparable.
I think that those, like, no, I would think that those are very comparable in terms of how people perceive them, right? Like there's lots of people who have sex in high school. Normally we would look at them and a lot of people would be like, wait a second, right? Like they're high schoolers, they're like exploring their sexuality, they're having sex with each other, it's fine. But I would say the age of consent is still good and we ought to still use it, because otherwise we have to draw these lines arbitrarily. We have to draw this line somewhere in society. It might not always lead to like the most perfect explanations, but this is the one that gives us the most utility.
Right, no, I agree about that with the age of consent. I don't know what that has to do with thinking about a person while you jerk off to them. The reason we value the age of consent, even though it is by definition an arbitrary line we've drawn, you're right, there's not really a distinction between being 1 second before 18 and being 18, of course, but we still maintain the law, is because the thing we're preventing, which is the rape of children, is valuable. I need the value explained to me on why it's wrong to masturbate while thinking of a person. Like, what are we defending? What am I fighting for?
There we're defending, we're defending someone's categorical right to consent. That's what we're defending there.
I don't think their consent is relevant. They're not being invoked in anywhere but my thoughts. I'm not using their neurons. It's my neurons.
But we would still say that, but for them existing, you wouldn't be able to even picture what they look like. Like you cannot even do that without them existing. So I would say that in that extent, and I know that people are going to look at this and be like, well, Riley, this is like a really obscure example. But I would say in that sense that you are still using them similarly if you were using like a picture taken without someone's consent.
I think those are very different things. When you take a picture of a person, first of all, you're discussing proximity. Second of all, you're talking about creating a physical or digital record of a person. Third of all, we do take pictures without people's consent all the time. If you're just wandering around your workplace, sort of taking photos of your house, and you snap a picture of your family member or whatever, there are contextual modifiers here. It's not just like security cameras. I don't know every security camera that I've ever walked in front of, certainly. The context we're talking about here is taking a photo with sexual intent. And for me, it really depends on how you take it, right? Now, if you're like sneaking up on them to get like a little candid shot and you jerk off to that, I think the taking the picture of it is weird, like those said, but the jerking off bit seems to me like the non-issue. I mean, if you took that picture but didn't jerk off to it, I still think that would be weird. The picture seems to be the problem there.
I would disagree, because we can imagine, so Doe agreed to this, or I was talking about this with someone, it may have been with Doe. We can imagine when someone is in public, right, where we would probably say that it's fine to be able to take pictures of them, right? They don't have the same entitlement to privacy, and maybe they weren't even acting in a sexual way. But let's say that you take a photo of someone and you end up uploading it to a website where it's just, like, the whole point of that website is to masturbate to pictures of women taken without their knowledge.
Yeah,
right?
You're talking about creep shots. But that does involve taking the picture, which is the element that I take issue with. If you're thinking of, like, creep thoughts.
So how is that an issue?
Because you're creating a public archive of real people. You're uploading photos. I'm sorry, do you not see the difference? You're uploading photos.
I just want to know what the issue with that is, because it seems like we already live in a society where we've conceded that that is just basically a normal part of society.
To upload photos to jerk-off sites?
No, to upload photos online generally.
Online generally, sure. So like the taking a photo in a way which broaches a person's personal space would be a way in which you can do it that's bad. And what you do with that photo after you've taken it can be bad. But you can take a photo of a person in a way that's creepy with no sexual intent whatsoever. I mean, you can try it. Go to a restaurant, sit in one of the stalls, and then creepily snap a photo of the person in the stall over. You do not have to jerk off to that photo for you to feel like a weirdo doing it. So in this case, I think it's just...
Let me ask you about a different scenario then.
What you're talking about here is violating social norms concerning photographing others, which are complicated. And I don't know if I have a consistent understanding, because you could throw a million examples. But we're not talking about jerking off to the thought of a person. I just don't understand what the issue with it is. Who's being hurt?
Well, the issue, hold on, there's an issue of consent here. So we can use another example. Let's say that we have an Instagram model. They do not do any porn or any sex-based work, all right? But they upload their own pictures of their body online. And a lot of people end up jerking off to that person, even though they do not provide their consent, even though they do not give consent to be able to do that. Now, do you think that there's any difference between using that person's image versus using the images uploaded by someone who is a professional, like someone who is paid to create pornography? Do you think there's a difference between those two things?
One of them is probably going to be way hotter. Right? If you're asking me morally if there's anything wrong to jerking off to the Insta model, my answer is no. I think that you could jerk off to either and be as morally absolved, fucking game crashed, and be as morally in the clear in both cases. 1 second, let me force quit this before my computer explodes. Holy shit.
All right, then let's take that. All right, so I would disagree with that, but in order to get at that, we have to go with other examples. So let's say that we have someone who's not an Instagram model. Let's say that we have someone online who is just like your average family member.
People used to jerk off to Facebook swimsuit photos all the time. Like, that was like a whole thing. Now boomers use Facebook, but back when it was novel, people would be like, oh, I saw her her swimsuit photos, and I jerked off to it. That's not even swimsuit photos. Sometimes they'll just see like a cute girl or whatever. Now, I never engage in this behavior. I know that you can type boobies into Google. And some show up, but some other people haven't learned.
Listen, I was a teenager once.
Right. Well,
okay.
We can imagine that, like, if you go on Facebook,
I was a teenager
let's take the same
once.
scenario, but instead of the Instagram model, you just have like, let's say that you have a person and they work with someone who they are also friends with on Facebook. They have a crush on that person, and then as a consequence of that crush, they end up masturbating to pictures of that person on social media. All right. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say that after this person does this for so many number of times, they end up going and telling the person who they masturbated to the images to that they have been masturbating to them. Mm-hmm. Can we reasonably imagine why the person who had been masturbated to would feel uncomfortable being told this information?
Yeah, because you told them. That's the rookie mistake.
Wait, no, that's not the issue here, though, right? Like,
it absolutely is the issue.
Yes,
here. Yeah,
it
you should have
is.
kept your fucking mouth shut. You'd be fine.
That's it.
So it's fine to be able to engage in behavior if they just never find out.
If it doesn't involve them in their consent or bodily autonomy at all, yeah, they're not there. You're just thinking of them. I don't need their I don't need their permission to think about them while jerking off to them. There are plenty of things I could do that are fine that they might be uncomfortable if I told them. If I like jerking off while looking at pornography is fine. At least it doesn't violate consent, you know. But if I went up to them and said, "Hey, last night I jerked off to pornography," they would also think that's pretty creepy that I told them, right? Past that.
Yeah.
Right. But now we're at a problem of just defining like what counts as involving someone.
Certainly not that.
All right, but what can you tell me like where is the threshold for involving someone? That is the issue.
Well, I think at the very least they should be there. I mean, there should be some kind of contact.
Wait, there has to be physical contact?
No, like any kind of contact. You could be on the phone. I mean, literally anything. But like, we're talking about zero contact. You're just thinking of them. There's nothing unless you believe in some kind of magical. The Japanese think you sneeze if you're talked about, you know, like something like that. But
Wait,
anything
someone,
past
you can
that.
imagine people
no harm.
who are able to engage in sex acts alone, right?
Yeah, it's been known to happen.
So in that case, contact actually does not matter. It actually doesn't matter.
Not for committing a sex act, but for committing a sex act with a person, then yeah, some kind of affiliation of any kind would be necessary.
Okay, so here we have to figure out like where's the threshold for involving someone else.
I'm sure philosophers have lived and died discussing this. I'm uninterested. It does not involve merely thinking about a person.
No,
wherever
it does.
Wherever the line is, it's past that. I don't want to have a conversation about what exact level of contact. We're talking about thinking about a person here. This doesn't even count. Wherever the conversation starts, it's not here.
All right, well, let me explain why it's relevant then. Because the reason why it's relevant to determine at what point involving someone else in a sexual act, or at what point we can say that you're involving someone else in a sexual act, the reason why it's important to be able to define that for purposes of this discussion is because in the original discussion, in the original tweet that we were talking about, where Doe said that I had called them a pedophile, which I didn't, what I specifically said was, I said that they were either intentionally making an argument that pedophiles would make, or they had negligently made one, that they weren't aware of the implications, but that they negligently made one.
Were people in your audience calling it a pedophile?
Were people in my, I mean, like, I think at the point, so the answer to that, truthfully, is probably at the point where they agreed that they would affirm the ability for people to be able to orgasm in front of children.
I'm pretty sure it was taking place well before that. Now I'm not gonna go internet sleuthing, but see, this is one of those semantic differences that it's what is it? Distinction without a difference. When in the context of the conversation you all were having, and by the way, I agree with almost everything we talked about. So wait. Whatever you say about it, you'll have to say about me too, I'm afraid. In the context of the conversation, it's pretty clear where your condemnations are rooted and what they lead to. Now, semantically, can we prove that you specifically use that language? No, you are a pedophile. No, maybe there's some evidence somewhere, but I don't know of it. But in terms of the effect this has on Doe, I think it's well within its rights to say that you did so, because the language you've used feels, at least to us, like the lawyer version of saying that. You've constructed the is but isn't, you know, the not really a dog whistle, but you found a way to say it without saying it. And as Doe pointed out, your audience vibed with that. So
the reason, all right, well, can I justify this then?
Sure, but the initial Twitter take, which was just going barefoot in front of a partner, because they have a foot fetish in public, like this to you was what warranted saying an inadvertent defense of pedophilia? I don't think those are the arguments pedophiles make. I've seen the crazy internet YouTube exposés of like Discord moderators whose lives have been ruined because they, you know, got caught harassing teens or whatever. This usually isn't the argumentation they engage in. So
nope.
Chew hates Chew on Head is a voracious anti-pedophile hound, and even Chew here did not find Doe's arguments sussy-wussy. I just don't think it's appropriate.
I'm sorry, one moment. Something's happening. Just one moment.
No worries.
You talked about my girlfriend. She really would like to come on. She said it seems urgent.
It's urgent. What? I would like to know what it's for. It's already extended a little bit past. I mean, we obviously have some severe disagreements here. I just feel like the terminology that you employed just destroyed a chance at a good conversation. I feel like most of what I said stands for itself. Just in what needs to be said.
The reason why is
Riley doing?
And she feels the same way. I'm just reading messages, right? Mm-hmm. I've been strawmanned and harassed because of this, and I'd like to defend myself.
This platform is not for your exonerations. I'm covering this drama. If this has anything to do with any context beyond the one tweet of hers that I looked at, then it's beyond the scope of what I'm doing here. You have your own stream. I've seen you with more than 1,000 viewers for a good portion of the day. At any point, your girlfriend can come on, I'm sure, and correct the record.
All right. Then I'd like to go back to the specific tweet, and I'd like to be able to defend what I was saying about it, because I think that what I was saying was defensible. Now, when we're talking about, I just want to like start with like the plain meaning. Like I just want to like talk about the plain meaning of what Doe was implying. Mm-hmm. You'd agree with me that Doe agreed that the implication of their tweet was to justify being able to orgasm in front of children, right?
No, I think that's remarkably uncharitable.
You know, Vaush, they literally agreed to that verbatim.
I'd probably chuckle and say,
that's fine. I don't think that's a summary of their argument. I think they were making the argument that there were, by the way. I think that their argument was that there are types of sexual acts that you can engage in fairly in public, which you and I agree with, making out with people. That's fine.
Vosh, you're not addressing the argument, though.
If the orgasm is the critical distinction here, then if there are people with, fine-tuned genitalia who can come from kissing, a miracle, I know, some exist.
But this isn't kissing. This is appealing to a foot fetish.
Kissing
right?
is absolutely
Ultimately, they agreed that
sexually...
they justified getting someone off to their foot fetish to the point of orgasm in front of children. They justified that.
Now, what does that mean to you when you say that?
What do you mean, what does that mean to me? They justify being able to bring someone to orgasm with their foot fetish in front of children.
You mean like they just see your bare feet and they come from it?
Well, that was specifically the language that they used in their tweet.
Right, well...
They said that their partner likes feet, and I asked them about what that means. I asked, did you mean that this was a foot fetish? I asked them. All right, we can have another conversation about gender. I'll use it right now, but we also have to have a conversation about gender. So,
thank you.
When we're in this kind of a situation, said...
Oh, now she's using its pronouns. Wait, what? Why is Riley just now using its pronouns? Everybody knows what those pronouns are. Riley definitely knew what those pronouns were, okay? Why is Riley all of a sudden just now using the its pronouns, like, out of nowhere? Like, Riley's friends with Destiny. She knows about Destiny and the whole, like, shit that he pulled with Doe. Like, what? Oh, because Vaush will call them out? Well, maybe. Or Vaush would call Riley out? Yeah. Oh. Is this actually doing... Okay, I guess the work knife does a bit of damage. It's not the worst thing in the world.
To the idea that was specifically talking about a foot fetish, right?
Mm-hmm.
It agreed to that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it agreed to the idea that the partner was primarily trying to get its partner off on the basis of that foot fetish in front of kids.
I don't know if, with the original tweets, I don't know if they specified in those tweets like orgasm, like getting off.
That's why I asked it. I asked though more questions about what exactly it meant, and it said that that's what it meant.
Gotcha. Or
it agreed with that characterization. All right. So I asked further clarifying questions because that's what I thought it meant, and it agreed with that assessment.
I think Doe earlier said that's not the case, but we can work. Let's work with the most extreme possible example. I mean, Doe said in my chat that's not the case, but had I only a better memory. And chat, if you have the full list of tweets, you're free to bring them up. But anyway, with regards to the specifics here, okay, fine. Making out with a person. Say a person has a hair trigger. You make out with them in public, they come from it. Now, making out with a person is undeniably a sexually gratifying act. In fact, unlike foot fetishes, it's an almost universally sexually gratifying act. For me, if I saw a bare foot,
we're not talking about that.
We're
talking about what it said. This isn't what it said. All right.
I'm talking with you
whether
about
or not what I said was justifiable, and we're going off of what it said.
Right, and I'm talking with you right now about an instance where an act of public sexual gratification leads to an orgasm, which I think is exactly what you were referring to. I mean, I think these are
identical.
We're
talking about whether that's not identical.
How is it not identical?
Because in the second scenario, you're talking about doing something where you're not doing something primarily to sexually gratify.
No, you are making out primarily to sexually... at least for me, when I make out with a person, the main reason I'm doing it is usually because we're horny. That is definitely, not just like 51%, that's like overwhelmingly the reason that I am doing that. So this is a primarily sexual act designed for gratification.
So you're saying that you're making out with someone primarily in order to orgasm, and then you come to orgasm in front of children?
No, in order to elicit arousal, and if they, in that arousal, nut in their pants, and it's in like a park or something. This is what I mean by the way. Wait, hold on. This is what I mean by the way about this is what I mean about the bad faith. The language that you elicit really does come off like you're just looking for clips. In front of children, Wait, stop. Riley, nobody here, least of all me, would back off of a take, okay? I'm fully aware of what I'm saying. I have at no point indicated that that's not the case. No, I've kept saying, you're in a park, you're in public, kids could be there. I've said this so many times, but every time you insist, in front of the children, you're very clear, you want to get that into, what, a 30 or 60 second snapshot of the conversation?
I'm not trying to get a clip.
It comes off that way. We all know what we're talking about. So stop with the semantic runabout. Let's just...
This isn't semantics. This has to do with the specifics of this case.
So I ask you, you make out with them. You're in a public park. There are people of all ages there. The person with whom you are making out has a hair trigger, and they come from making out with you. What a gift they have. Do you think this is... I'm sorry?
I would distinguish that. I would say that in that case, you're not trying to get them to orgasm in that sense. They have a hair trigger. They come accidentally.
Anyone who comes from looking at their partner's bare feet also has a hair trigger.
That's not a hair trigger. You're appealing to specifically a foot fetish.
Yeah,
there's a big difference between that.
And they might have a hair...
Wait, okay.
What do you mean?
So,
a hair trigger for
yes,
that?
If you have a foot fetish and you can come simply from looking at feet, you have a hair trigger in addition to having a foot fetish. But
no,
everyone...
that's not what was talked about.
Almost everyone, at least, likes making out.
That was not what was in the original tweet, though.
We're not... The did the tweet specifically say orgasm? Because anything short of that, we're operating off of inferences and reinterpretations, okay?
No, I was able to specifically ask, though, what it meant, And they agreed with my assessment that we're talking about a foot fetish and that you could justify bringing someone to orgasm in front of children.
Yeah, but if they do it just by looking at people's bare feet, that would be a hair trigger. Here, the tweet was this.
No, but it's not just that. All right, it's not just that. We're talking about someone doing something primarily in order to appeal to that specific sexual desire.
This is so ridiculous.
Making out is a thing. When I make out with someone, I am doing it to specifically appeal to their sexual desire of being.
But you're not doing it specifically to get them off.
No, if you walk in public, by get them off, you mean orgasm.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody who could come just from seeing feet like out there is as much of a hair trigger as a person who could come simply from making out.
This is such a bizarre conversation,
Look at this
Loki.
tweet, all right? They agreed with me, all right? So this is an extrapolation.
If you go shoeless to a public event because your partner likes feet, you're not involving children in a sexual act. This doesn't even use the term getting off.
I asked them, hold on. Some people like feet. That's obviously referring to a foot fetish. I asked Doe if that's referring to a foot fetish. They agreed. Okay? So that's step one. And if you go shoeless to a public event because your partner likes feet, because your partner has a foot fetish, you're appealing to that foot fetish, we're talking about a sexual act.
Yeah, but we're not talking about orgasming.
You are trying to appeal. You are doing something because you know it's specifically appealing to your partner.
You are all over the place. This tweet does not even suggest orgasm. Some people
like
feet. If you go, Riley, some people like feet. If you go shoeless to a public event because your partner likes feet, you're not involving children in a sexual act. I've watched your debate with it twice, and in neither case was I under the impression that Doe ceded the idea that this tweet implied orgasm. Doe went on to discuss further hypotheticals with you. I do not recall that. Now, do I have a good memory? I absolutely do not. But I do not have any memory of that taking place. If we're going to talk about anything specific, it is why you thought this tweet justified saying that Doe was promoting pedophilic arguments intentionally or unintentionally. This tweet right here is unassailable. It is bulletproof. You could armor Iraqi soldiers with it, and they would be that you could drop a Moab on them, and they would live.
I absolutely disagree.
So you think so? Let's remove the orgasm. You think that you're involving children in a sexual act by going to a place barefoot with your partner and choosing to be barefoot because you know your partner likes your feet, like they have a foot fetish.
Now, hold on, pause.
That is a yes or no question, right?
All right, then the answer is no, and I'll explain it.
Has this all been over Riley misunderstanding come and get off?
You're causing harm by engaging in incredibly risky behavior.
What is risky?
Right?
Is that what this is all caused
when you're
by?
engaging in something which has a very high likelihood of causing someone else harm. So you are either directly involving someone else in a sexual act, or you risk doing so.
By walking around barefoot. That's a risky act.
It's not by walking around barefoot. It's by walking around barefoot specifically because you know that it gets your partner off by virtue of their foot fetish.
So how is this different from making out with your partner in public? See, now we've removed orgasm from the table. We're just making out. So to be clear, I'm talking about a full-on steamy makeout sesh. None of this high school... Actually, high schoolers make out harder than anyone, I guess, like, because it's the first time you've done it, right? At least I'm better at it now. But I'm talking... Let's say fucking slobbering makeout, you know, you're just insanely into it. This is absolutely for sexual gratification for you both. Now, is this a bit tasteless? Sure. I would argue it can be a bit tasteless in public. That PDA... That's a lot. But is it involving children in sexual acts?
I agree.
If there are children in the vicinity. If you're in a park, if you're in an airport, is it involving them in a sexual act?
Yeah, the risk involves becoming hold on, so we need to go through this.
I'm
so
making a
little
fireplace chat.
I'm specifying. We've already moved through
this. I understand that. I'm building up to that. So in this kind of a situation, what we're talking about is effectively crossing a threshold from where you are not engaging in what we would call a sexual act, because that's not your primary intention of making out, but somewhere along the ways that shifts, and now you are. All right.
Yeah,
and there, I would say that you are engaging in a sexual act
by making out. Yeah, okay, so
but
so
yes, not just making out. You conceded that, like, no, you've crossed the threshold where now you're doing it primarily for sexual.
Yes, I didn't concede it. That was my opening statement. And yes, you're doing all of that.
So it's not just. So let's be clear. Like, let's not be like reductive. It's not just making out. Like, we're talking about something very specific here.
Are you paid by the hour before even finishing law school? This is extraordinary. Yes.
I'm not. What are you talking about? I'm just responding to your argument. I'm engaging with what you said.
Okay. Well, you're repeating what I've said. Yes, it is a sex act. I would agree. You're making out hot and heavy. It is a sex act. Do you think it's involving adjacent children in the sex act?
Do you think that you're without their consent,
violating?
I think that you run a heavy risk of involving them if you do it.
By the way, this isn't current Minecraft. This is modded Minecraft.
In order to be able to continue doing that. Like, that's the reason we tell people, hey, get a room. You know, because at some point we realize, yeah, like there's probably a threshold that you cross where you ought go somewhere private. Okay. This is not an extreme take. So, and I think like if you want me, I can give you another analogy for
what I have a follow-up question, then we can entertain this analogy. So
yeah, it feels that way, Lonnie. Honestly, it does.
If a person on Twitter was like, "Yeah, I don't care. I'll make out with my husband."
I don't want to psychoanalyze, but you're not.
You would like
sounding
that person
off
and
right
say,
now.
You're unintentionally or intentionally justifying pedophilia with these arguments. No, wait, hold on. We have established every single equivalence. We are talking about a sexually gratifying act done primarily for sexual gratification, a sex act, which we are doing in public. It is 100% equivalent. We have annihilated the orgasm. It is not relevant to this specific example because it wasn't in the tweets. The behavior. I am reduced to assuming that you just have a hatred for foot fetishes, which, by the way, same. And your bias is from that, or it has something to do with Doe. Because these are equivalent. Explain to me what the difference is between the makeout that I just described and the foot fetish example illustrated in Doe's tweet, where it said you are merely going footless while outside with a foot fetishist partner. No orgasms involved, no getting off, 2 sex acts done in public. Why is one of them shoeless, not footless? Why is one of them justifying pedophilia and the other isn't?
Footless.
So wait, hold on. So is the example of the tweet that you sent out, are we not talking about that? Because I can distinguish why that's not something like like the other examples that we're talking about. In that instance, you did not specify that, like, oh, the reason that they're doing that, the reason that they're going to go kiss their husband is in order to specifically appeal to some kind of sexual desire.
I did say that. I did say you are making out with somebody because it is sexually gratifying. You're going up to them. You can even announce it beforehand. I am going to make out with you because it is hot and sloppy, and then you do so.
You can be able to make out with someone for multiple reasons.
No, wait, Riley. You need a four-level. No. What I said specifically controlled.
That's not talking about a sexual act. Based on what you said.
No, you said it was.
Based on the tweet, we're talking about all right. There's 2 different scenarios. That you're
Riley. My example of making out in public was one which you described to be a risky sex act, and likewise with Doe's tweet. So I ask you to distinguish between them. Please don't say, well, not all kissing is sexual, because that's already accounted for in the example that I proceeded with.
No, I mean, hold on, but that is so. Otherwise, so we can go through this. So in the situation specifically, like what you described, and I want to make sure because I feel like. Because this was the implication of what you just said. I feel like you're about to turn around and say, oh, well, just because Riley says that these 2 things are analogous, because right now I'm inclined to believe that they are, they're going to say that all kissing in public is therefore endorsing pedophilia, which is not my argument.
No.
I would say that in the scenario like what you described, specifically the way that you're engaging, where you're engaging primarily in order to get each other off, if you're doing that in front of children, it looks a little sus. Yeah.
Okay, so would you say that a person who defends that, the sloppy makeout sessions in public, whether it be in an airport or a public park or wherever else, would you say those people are intentionally or unintentionally enabling pedophilia with their arguments? As you did with Doe.
I would say that if you're trying to defend being able to get off your partner sexually in front of children, in whatever way that is, then that would be a little sus.
Doe's tweet did not say get off.
They agreed.
No, we are talking. You said what you said. Wait, Riley, Riley, it has been in my chat saying that is not the case. I don't believe you. Now, either way, wait, Riley, I haven't muted yet, and I don't want to. You called Doe what you called Doe before this conversation. So based only on the content of the tweet, you must answer me. What is the difference between a person defending sloppy makeout sessions in public and what Doe tweeted, which did not involve getting off, did not involve orgasm, said...
Good point. You don't get to use something that was said later to prove that to try to prove in quotes that you knew when you said it, when you couldn't have possibly known. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point, Vaush. Good thinking.
Only going barefoot around your foot fetishist partner to turn them on. As one does. When I make out with somebody, I am turned on. When somebody leans in to make out with me, they do it to turn me on because it's a makeout session.
No, so the problem with the way that you're asking this question is that it's presupposing that the tweet in question doesn't have the meaning that is reasonably surmisable and that Doe eventually confirmed. All right?
There's nothing in that tweet that says getting off at all. Nothing in there even infers, implies.
That's what the implication is.
How?
And that's why I asked Doe about the implication, and they agreed to me.
It didn't. It has been in my chat saying it didn't. And by the way, I don't remember it doing so either. I only remember it entertaining the hypothetical after feeling
it did multiple times. I asked it very clearly.
Riley, I am not interested in arguing with you against a person's interpretation when they're in my chat to argue against it. I am only interested in talking about the tweet and reasonable inferences from it. And nothing in this tweet even remotely suggests orgasm. Going shoeless to a public event because your partner likes feet? Where does this imply orgasm?
I think, hold on, someone just sent me the actual clip. If you want, we can watch it together.
Sure, but it doesn't matter. I want to know why you responded to Doe with regards to this tweet. Where in this tweet
it doesn't matter because this is Doe clarifying the exact meaning of it.
I want you to explain to me where in this tweet...
I have the clip. We can go over it right now.
We will go over it shortly, but I want you to tell me, without any further context, does this tweet in and of itself suggest to you orgasm is involved?
This tweet leads to a reasonable implication that it is.
I think that is either insane or dishonest, and I have to leave it to my audience to decide.
I literally agreed to that interpretation.
How long after? What was this? June 30th, 2021. Did you peer into the future? Do you have a crystal ball?
No, we have to make reasonable summations about what the meaning of these words are.
How is it reasonable?
Because it's talking about a foot fetish.
You can have a foot fetish without coming in your pants. I have never known a person with a foot fetish who came in their pants because a person near them was barefoot. That's some high-level stuff.
Reasonable since it agreed to that description of it.
Hold on. So those here, hold on. And again, by the way, I don't think it did. But even if it did, that doesn't make you post hoc right. We are not a results-based analysis lover over here. If you are wrong then and accidentally proven right in the future.
Hold on. No, I think it's good evidence. I had a pretty good idea about what was being talked about.
Hold on. So Doe says in the chat right now, I didn't, quote, clarify the meaning of the tweet, end quote. I continued in another example that orgasming in public can be okay sometimes. That is not what the tweet means, Vaush. So Doe is saying right now that this tweet does not contain any inference to orgasm, which I don't read in it either. As an orgasm lover, I'm not seeing it here. I want to when I can.
I would disagree. Some people like if you go to... All right, hold on, because we need to make sure that we're putting this tweet in the context. What we're talking about within the context of this thread is specifically sex. All right, that was what we were talking about in the context of this tweet thread.
Sex acts include making out. Have you ever come from making out?
What? No, but this is...
Wait, hold on. But making out... Wait, but making out can be a sex act, right?
Context, all
right? But making out can be a sex act, can't it?
the initial tweet was talking specifically in the context of an entire thread about sex act.
Yes, like making out can be, as you agreed with me, but I've never come from a makeout
It can
session.
be if you are trying to do it in order to orgasm.
Wait, you think making out is only a sex act if you do it in an effort to orgasm?
Yeah, you can be able to make out for romantic reasons. You can make out for, like, I've made out with my girlfriend for just romantic reasons. You don't have
I'm
to
not.
do it
Wait, hold on.
specifically.
This is like a basic logical error. I'm not saying all forms of making out are sex acts, but like, so what about slapping a person's ass? If that doesn't make them orgasm, does that not make it? What is your definition
Well,
of sex act?
no, there'd be other problems with that. All right, hold on. You know that there would be other problems with that kind of an example.
With your partner.
What, with your partner? Well,
Yeah,
if
you
they
slap your partner's ass in
there would
public.
be like a bodily autonomy issue.
No, it's your partner. They're fine with it. It's
I've
your
done
partner.
that before.
If it's your partner, then it's just nothing. I mean, if they've
That's
already
not a
consented, then but the only issue there would be a bodily autonomy one.
Well, okay, so say they're.
Is it wrong to smack? Is it wrong for me to smack my girlfriend Lonnie's butt in public? Discuss, chat. Is it an infringement on the bodily autonomy of others in the grocery store when I chased Lonnie down the aisle, grabbing at her butt cheek? I don't actually do that. Maybe a little.
They're fine with it. What about squeezing their tits in public?
What about
True.
I've never been.
I
I've
do
never been
that.
a girl.
I mean, like, I don't
I
know
definitely do that.
Is that a
I mean,
sex act?
not if you're not if you're not doing it in order to get them off.
Oh, this is wait. Okay, so
I mean, it would be another issue. It would be a bodily autonomy issue.
so you no, there's no bodily.
It's actually wrong if you don't do that. True.
So you're saying that I could grope my girlfriend's tits in public, but it's
No,
not.
I'm not
Well,
saying
but it's
that.
not a sex act because I know that my girlfriend can't come from it on its own.
No, this has all right. So this is a difference between, again, ontology and epistemology.
No, it's a difference between a sensible
Yes, it
understanding
is.
of sex acts and a nonsensible one.
No. I'm going to
Is
explain.
caging a
exactly
dick
the
in like
thing.
one of those chastity cages a sex act? That goal of that thing is to do the opposite of get you off. That does the
All right,
opposite.
Vaush, no, you need to stop and listen to me, and I will explain why you cannot do that.
Give
and
me
why
the
it's still not a
clip
sex
with
act.
give me
'Cause
the
I
clip with
agree.
though. Please give me the clip with though. I know this
Hold on,
conversation will
hold on,
continue
wait,
forever.
Well, I need to explain. All right, you
My
asked me a
There's
question.
always
I'm
an
going to
explanation. Give me the
explain.
clip. I'll watch it with
You're
screen.
giving
You
me
can
always an
explain.
explanation. I can explain to you. You asked me a question. I can give you an answer. Can I please
Which
give you an
question
answer?
did I ask you?
You asked me why you wouldn't be able to, or why you would be able to grope your partner's breasts in public. I would say that you would not be able to.
Is it a sex act? To grope?
I would say it is not a sex act, but because we're looking primarily at intent, when we surmise what a sex act is, then any reasonable person would look at that and still say that we ought not allow that kind of behavior in public.
Why?
This is also the reason why, even though you
Why?
may have the situation with the good faith wearer of like a gimp suit, we could imagine where you have instances where like someone wears a gimp suit just because they like the feel of it or whatever. We would still say that you aren't allowed to do that around people because the primary intention of wearing that thing, of doing that thing, is for sexual purposes, right? Like in the situation you described,
Like
even if you're not like
grabbing
trying to,
your
even if you're not
girlfriend's
appealing
tits.
to a
But is
partner's
it
sexual desire,
inherently
most people would look
inappropriate?
at that kind of behavior and understand that's usually what people are doing.
That's
So
the
since we are looking at
main
intent,
point,
that's the
though.
best we have to do
Riley,
in this kind of
this is
situation.
wildly inconsistent for
This is
for-
absolutely not
this is-
inconsistent.
No, it absolutely is. So first of all,
Then explain
earlier
why.
you agreed to my definition of a sex act, which just meant behavior adjacent to sexual interest or desire.
No, I didn't agree to it. I
So,
acknowledge.
so sex
No,
act for
I
you.
didn't agree
So
to
hold
it,
on, wait,
Vaush.
Riley, wait, no, because Riley, you have a shovel and there's still dirt beneath you. You will never stop. So we
No,
can't,
you
we
need
can't,
to
you, we
explain-
could be here until
hold on,
3
you need
a.m.
to
my
explain.
time. We could be here forever. Give me the clip from Doe. You could have linked it in the Discord by now. Explain to me, please, while linking it. Do both. Explain to me
Here's the link.
why the definition of a sex act should only contain things
Do both.
which are meant to achieve orgasm.
I
You
like
said that
that.
it has to be towards getting off.
Well, the reason. All right, so hold on. So usually getting off is the inference. All right. But I would say when you are primarily appealing to sexual desires or interests, that naturally entails trying to get off. When that is
No.
the primary thing you are trying to do, then that is the implication of that action.
Absolutely not. Something can be a sex act without it being about trying to bring a person to orgasm. What about
Then-
people like having
then
their face
that-
pissed
then-
on? You can't come from that, can you? But it's
but
absolutely
we
a
would-
sex act.
But we need to be able to acknowledge that there are sex acts where someone is not coming to orgasm. Otherwise, we end up in situations where, for example, if you have someone who rapes a person, but they are impotent, they are unable to come to orgasm, we want to still be able to call that a sex act. We
Yeah,
want to be
I
able to
agree. I
still
don't
call
think
that
orgasm has anything to do with a sex act. I think it's
rape. And I would agree.
okay. So if you're making out with a person real hot and heavy, do you think that's a sex act? If the goal for the makeout session is to sexually arouse both people,
I think that if the natural implication of that is arousing them enough to eventually bring them to orgasm, then yeah.
like they're both. You just said orgasm wasn't the necessary.
Sorry. Yeah, all right. Let me. All right. so
No,
let
you
me-
just did that accidentally. You're correcting yourself live. We could do this for another 5 hours. You've done this
No, no,
multiple
no,
times
no,
before.
no, I'm not
you
correcting
just did that
myself.
live. You were
No,
wait.
because
Oh, hold on.
I'm distinguishing kissing generally, all right, from kissing in the way that you are describing.
Nobody
all
is
right? I would
talking
say
about
that
kissing generally. Hot and heavy
all right, I'm
makeout.
saying
You're
that
wrapping your
kissing
arms around it.
generally, when you're doing it for romantic purposes, is not a
No,
sexual act.
yeah, nobody's talking about that. Hot and heavy making out, arms
Yeah,
wrapped
and in
around
that
both
case,
sides.
I would call it whenever you move to wherever you are primarily focusing on sexual gratification,
all right, or sexual desires, or the satisfaction of sexual desires.
Sexual desire, that's different from getting off. Like, my sexual desire is elicited when I see cleavage. But that's not, I mean, women wear that shit.
Well, then how about this? All right, then maybe this will help. Can we draw a distinction between sexual kissing and romantic kissing?
You wouldn't need to, because all I've ever been talking about is sexual kissing, and for some reason, for 80 times now, you felt the need to distinguish between that and the thing we're not talking about, which is non-sexual kissing. We don't need to, because the distinction, there's not just a line between these two. We have drawn a canyon between these two things.
Then yeah, I would say that you should not do that in public.
Okay.
I would say that you can do romantic kissing in
hot
public.
and heavy making out, like sex, yeah, like sexy kissing.
Yeah, like you should, I would say that you should not do sexual kissing in public. I would say find a room. That's what the conventional wisdom is.
Sure.
And by the way, relating this back to the original tweet, this is a big skip
It's
away
a crazy one for
from
sure.
where we started, which is saying that you should be able to get your partner off.
That was wait. Why would you say the tweet and then say a thing that wasn't in the tweet?
Because that was the implication of it.
I want a difference, Riley.
I just
Riley, yes, I'll read it in just a second. But
what it said.
That's right. So even if Doe said that was what they meant in that, or what it meant in that tweet, it is irrelevant to the fact that the tweet itself, in the context already provided, was something that you felt elicited accusations of pedophilia defense. And I want you.
No.
Wait. Yes, the tweet was all you had.
No, I think that any reasonable person can look at that and come away with the meaning of, oh yeah, this is talking about a foot fetish.
Yes,
right?
a foot. Yes, but not orgasm.
If you're talking about someone specifically trying to appeal, like, it's not just a foot fetish.
Riley, honest question. Do you know how sex works?
What? Yes.
You can satiate a fetish without it being driven to fulfill an orgasm.
What if?
No,
I'm almost concerned for you.
If it turns out this whole time that Riley is a virgin, do we forgive her? Like, do we all just go, alright. If it turns out this whole time Riley's been a virgin. She has a girlfriend. She's also a Christian. Who knows?
The meaning of reasonable is.
No. Stop. No, stop. Wait. Do you recognize that a sex? Do you recognize?
Treat you in good faith.
Do you recognize that not all?
On the topic.
Do you recognize that not all sexual behavior is designed to end in orgasm?
Yes, I understand that.
Okay.
That's the reason why. That is the reason why I do not define sexual acts according to orgasm.
So what about the foot fetish tweet implies orgasm?
In the original. So wait, hold on. So in the original tweet, we are talking about. I think it's. I want to be very particular in my wording. The question initially is whether or not it was reasonable to be able to say in this situation whether or not it was reasonable to say that this is something which ends up justifying sex acts in front of kids.
Okay, yes, we're talking about sex acts, not orgasm.
Right. So in this situation, so there's two different things here, right? The first situation is the fact that if we're talking about whether or not this justifies sex acts in front of kids, the answer to that question is yes. I think that is apparent from a clean
like
reading of
making
this.
out
But you
in
already
front of
agreed.
kids. Yes, okay.
You already agreed.
Like
that,
doing the hot and heavy makeout in front of kids, right?
So hold on, wait. Let's stay on this topic, all right? We're talking about a foot fetish and appealing to someone's foot fetish. You would agree that is a sex act, right?
Yeah, like a hot makeout. Yes, both of those are sex acts.
All right, so
in fact, I would actually say that. I would actually say. Wait, Riley. This is not. I'm not interested enough in this conversation for you to think that I'll just mute you instead of hanging out. Riley, to be clear, a makeout sesh is significantly more involved than being barefoot around a person with a foot fetish, okay? In that, there's no physical contact. At least in a makeout sesh, you're touching each other in public. There's PDA there. It's not PDA to look at your partner who's barefoot. So, in fact, the makeout session that I have illustrated here is actually, I think, more inappropriate than the thing that you called Doe a pedophile over. Or, sorry, said it enabled pedophilic arguments over.
So all right, so hold on. So I think that we're almost at, like, the point of this, right? You would agree with me that this tweet is talking about a sex act. You said that earlier, right?
Yes.
Okay, this tweet is justifying doing a sex act in front of children.
Like,
yes or no?
Yes, like I think people should be able to make out in public. Yes. Again, the way you're reducing it is deliberately like clip oriented, but yes.
So the answer, all right. So if I say that this is a kind of argument that leads someone to either negligently or intentionally justify pedophilic beliefs of wanting to be able to involve children in sex acts, I don't think that is an unreasonable read of this tweet, since we have agreed.
No, I think it's insane.
Since we've agreed that it justifies doing sex acts in front of kids.
No, I think that's insane. I think what you're essentially saying is that if you have a makeout sesh with a person and you're in public and a kid sees you and you defend that later. Do you think that
there's a difference between a makeout session and appealing to someone's foot fetish?
Yeah, actually, a makeout session is way the fuck more involved. There's physical contact and people can see what's going on. With a foot fetish, literally nobody knows because you're just barefoot. You just see a barefoot person.
Nobody knows, though.
So yeah, so I would actually say that. So first of all, neither of them enable pedophilia. But second of all, that the makeout sesh is actually whatever characteristics you're approximating, the makeout sesh is much more so. So
but it doesn't matter. The whole point is that it doesn't matter if the kids don't know. The point is that you.
But what they see matters, isn't it?
Yes, it does. It does absolutely.
In front of kids, that is the point.
It absolutely matters if the kids know what's going on.
I would say that their consent is violated.
Yeah, I would I think I've more or less exhausted my patience here. I would say what you're making right here is an argument that hurts children. I think this is a moralist. Like, wait, hold on.
What?
I think this is
Hold on,
insane.
man.
Wait. Oh, Riley,
Justify
I'll
that.
mute you. I think this is an insanely moralist argument that serves no purpose other than to dilute the meaning of actual child sex abuse, and you're using it specifically because you have some kind of weird fucking beef with this subject. I think it's borderline reprehensible that you would
I
ever
don't-
try to hop onto something as innocuous as making out with people in
You
public
agree that
and
those
use it
justify
to
sex
justify,
acts as- how is that-
like
how
making
is
out,
that
like
not
making.
that?
You think making out
Getting
in public
spicy.
is tantamount to non-consensually involving children acts.
You
I hope
think
to
that
God
it's fine to
you've
be
never
able to
made
go
out with
on
somebody in
the
public,
website
Riley,
and
because
find
if that's what you were thinking of, I'm disgusted. Jesus fuck! I hung up.
Was that it?
I would have had to because there's no condition under which Riley would have ever ended that conversation. Like, Riley probably could have kept going for like 6 hours. That's fucking revolting. This is literally QAnon tier
Jesus.
shit. The people who will dilute the definition of, like, child sexual abuse by fear-mongering over it and invoking, like, Christian morality in an effort to, like, make everything they don't
gone.
like adjacent to child sexual abuse.
Jesus.
And child sexual abuse charities are like, please stop. You're actually ruining our ability to really fix this issue. Yeah, like, holy shit. No, it's not QAnon. Makes more sense. Yeah, I've never heard a QAnoner say making out in public is tantamount to fucking non-consensually involving children in sex acts. Holy shit. Well, I look forward to her being added to the fucking BDS cabal, but Jesus Christ.
Hey, are we excited for
Vaush,
Destiny
will this be
to get
uploaded?
involved
Why
in
the
this
fuck not?
drama?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I
Are
think
we
this is
excited
reprehensible. I
for
think anything
Destiny to
offended
come
by
to
the
bat
logic,
for
that's
Riley? It's gonna
the,
happen.
like,
Destiny's gonna
the
come hard to
conclusions
bat
here
for
were inevitable.
Riley.
Time for her to write another fake legal document insisting you're more emotional in Destiny. Yeah, fuck. Oh, we didn't even watch the fucking Doe clip. Okay, to be fair, I'll watch the Doe clip. Hold on. So Doe says... So to be clear, by the way, even if Doe in
Is
this
this
clip
it? Are we
said...
good? Have we seen it? Are we good? I think we've seen the debate. No, I'm not excited for that shit. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you're not. I'm sure you're not, my friend. There's a bit more. Is it worth continuing to play?
that the tweet originally entailed an implication of orgasm. Doe has denied that interpretation in its comments in my chat, so it would have been a misspeak, but we'll watch it anyway just for the sake of... I don't think it's relevant because Riley was calling Doe a pedo months before this statement was ever made, but sure,
The
we
example
watched
that
the
you
whole
tweeted
thing
about.
before.
Your partner,
It's 3 minutes.
foot fetish. You go out with your partner. You know that your partner has a foot fetish. You intentionally and primarily do not wear shoes in order to appeal to your partner's foot fetish. There are children around. You do not care that there are children around, but there are children around. Your partner, who also does not necessarily care that there are children around, ends up getting off orgasming as a consequence of you specifically appealing to their foot fetish. Do you think that there is any harm incurred to the children, even though that was not necessarily intentionally a part of the situation?
This isn't about the tweet. This is just an additional... Because that's what I thought it was. I thought it was... The tweet was another thing, and then it extrapolated and talked about this further.
Yes or no?
From the way you described that, no, I don't believe the harm is done to his children.
I would reject your framing of this. Violates have harm.
That's not, you didn't describe a harm.
Yes, I have. Admitted, you're fine with people being able to get off in front of children, at least in some...
Oh my god, this is edited? This is what I mean, by the way. You can't trust that fuck. RGR, at least her community, was absolutely fishing for clips. Look at this. This is a compilation of the portions of the conversation
Jesus.
meant to disingenuously frame Doe. Absolutely disgusting behavior. It's so unfortunate. People like her posture integrity really hard, but I feel like I and Doe have more integrity in our left pinky than RGR has in her entire fucking body. No consistency, no adherence to any actual consistent ethical system, no thought put in,
So
just post hoc
unfortunate.
moralization combined with incredibly loaded language and a community willing to lash out.
I liked Riley a lot prior to all this.
Is that Pinky
it's really
Bear?
unfortunate.
Oh, sorry, I gotta keep it gloved for the for the kids. RGR just called Doe a useful idiot, spreading around justifying beliefs.
Used as a useful idiot. Because even if they are not a pedophile, they are engaging in spreading beliefs that justify pedophilic behavior.
I genuinely do think that RGR's behavior here contributes to hurting children. For a public figure to engage in a moral witch hunt, attached not to any real defense of children and their safety, but rather an attempt at using severe language to justify their... I feel comfortable saying RGR's like... I don't want to be mean. RGR gave me the behavior of like somebody who's ideologically a virgin. Holy shit. Like the whole conversation, like, well, a sex act was designed to get you to orgasm. Like, what?
Ideologically a
Fucking
virgin. What a good
Oh,
way
well,
to
not that.
describe
I mean, well,
it.
it's,
Jesus.
by getting off, I mean, like, what? What the
An
fuck are you
ideological
talking about?
virgin.
And okay, the thing that I think means that we can write off Riley forever is that at the end, after an unbelievable amount of teeth pulling, we finally isolated the variables. Do you think then that making out in public in the way that I described is tantamount to, and defending that, the ability to make out in public like that, is tantamount to enabling pedophilic arguments? And rather than answer it directly, Riley just
God,
started saying,
Cherry, you're probably
see,
right.
you're defending sex acts in front of children. Like, the moment
God, you're
she
probably
couldn't
right,
run
Cherry.
from the implications of her statement any further, she ran back to the euphemized language in order to, like, maximize... in order to maximize the moral harm. You know what I mean? I genuinely don't know if this is like stupidity or very bad faith, but
How much
honest to
longer
God,
should
you
we
know,
listen for,
honest to
guys?
God, I think that Riley's just triggered by this subject, and Riley will say or do or justify anything if it arrives at the conclusions that she already holds, I think. The discomfort seems like really, really clear. I don't know. Your masculine voice is kind of attractive. There might be children listening. Shut up. How long till D suddenly pops in Discord? Oh, he'll be on it soon enough, but that's okay. For the funny thing is, I'm pretty sure Destiny has done all like the thing I'm pretty sure that Destiny has talked about engaging in behavior that Riley would call justifying pedophilia. If he throws his weight behind this, it's only further evidence to his utter brainlessness. Yeah, I should have asked about wearing glasses when your partner has a glasses fetish. Oh god, very stupid.
Wait, really?
Anyway, not much else to talk about, is there? Do we have anything in particular? Any particularly spicy memes?
No conclusion? I feel like I gave all of my thoughts. I don't think there's any need for a conclusion. Guys, do we feel like there's any need? Are we, like, do you think I need to do, like, I feel like I did it, right? We need it? Okay. Listen. Riley has had an unfortunate fall to grace, okay? Or fall from grace, okay? A very unfortunate fall from grace is what I'll say, okay? It's very sad. I haven't enjoyed watching it. I don't know why on earth she thought it was a good idea to do this whole, like, discourse, like, why she thought she should engage with all of this. Like, I don't know why she thought it was a good idea, but I guess she did. And, I don't know. I don't think her career is going to come out of it looking very good, guys. I'm going to be honest. Like, in terms of YouTube, most definitely, I don't think it's going to turn out well. And it might fuck up her prospects in real life as, like, a law student. I think it very well could. I mean, I don't think it wouldn't surprise me. If it got around that she'd said what she did to a child sexual assault survivor who's trans, like, that could be a bad look for any law firms. Like, I don't want anybody to, like, fuck with Riley's business prospects, but, like, you gotta be careful, guys. If any of you are watching right now and any of you in the future ever want to try to be a content creator or a YouTuber, you guys have to remember that, like, everything you say legitimately is on the internet forever, you know? And you have to be so careful because, like, employers and things like that do genuinely look you up on social media. Like, when they do background checks on you to see what you're all about, you know? They look up at your social media activity. Well, if you enjoyed that, please consider subscribing, ringing the bell icon, and following all my social media linked down below, including my Twitter, my Instagram, my TikTok, and my fan Discord,